So it turns out that men and women want different things.
Yep.
Shock. I know, yeah. And on that bombshell, I suppose, for more great revelations about what men want, you can subscribe to our website for as little as £5 a month and get interviews like this. This one's free, but obviously we've got to pay to bring the guests in, so we appreciate you helping us keep the lights on. I had a chat to Nina Power, who wrote a very humble book titled What Do Men Want? And unlike a lot of the interfering feminists who decide to womansplain what men should be doing, she just posed the question, asked her male friends, looked at how current culture and the economy is making men and women adversarial siblings rather than complementary collaborators. Really good chat, really nice woman, so go and have a listen. And I think Teen Vogue could have probably benefited from reading Nina's book because they commissioned a survey recently. This was from the Change Research group, and the survey was about young men and young women's attitudes towards politics, and also how that spilled over into their dating preferences. And so the article opens with the 2024 presidential election creeping ever closer, Change Research reached out to young voters to get their take on some important questions. The survey results shared with Teen Vogue include responses from 1,033 registered voters between the ages of 18 to 34, conducted between August the 25th and September the 1st. 43% of respondents identified as male, 45% as female, and here's the methodological biases: 5% as trans, 6% as non-binary or gender non-conforming, and 1% as other. So even if you're accepting those as legitimate identities, in the premise of the question, it's going to be skewed towards one particular bias. But if these findings are to be summed up in one sentence, it's this: young voters are pessimistic about everything from the economy to the direction of the country and to their ability to handle an unexpected $1,000 expense. Bidenomics in action. There is a striking gender divide in topics such as how young people identify politically. Men see themselves as more conservative, while women, trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people as more liberal. The podcasts they listen to, men are more inclined to listen to the Joe Rogan Experience and Ben Shapiro Show, while women are bigger fans of This American Life and The Daily. Now, I'm not familiar with those, but I assume that they're left-wing rags. Now, something that Josh would pull up on, were he here. He's not dead. He's just in the office.
God rest his soul.
Yep. Well, he doesn't believe in that, so we'll get round to it. The methodology might be a bit shaky because Change Research do all their surveys online. So the sampling size, again, might be skewed. So Change Research on their methodology page says, we conduct survey responses by publishing targeted online solicitations via adverts on websites and social media platforms, by finding a representative set of respondents via web and social media to take a poll. We are able to cast a net that's wider than phone polls. We reach millennials, seniors, rural and urban, members of every gender, race, creed, political persuasion, etc. Now, what Josh would be able to tell you is that there is a selection bias if you have it as an opt-in survey, and we don't know where they advertise this, on what platforms, alongside which websites, so they could have oversampled for a particular political persuasion. Again, if you're saying gender and non-conforming and all that are legitimate identities, then you've already skewed it in one direction. But anyway, so back to the Teen Vogue survey, right? So this is the interesting stuff. 41% of women identified as politically progressive. 24% of men do. Now, that's a factor of 2 to 1.
Good job, boys.
Exactly. So we're seeing something very important here. Only 15% of men feel the same, while 23% of women consider themselves, sorry, I don't know what's happened there. 18% of the men survey themselves as conservative, compared with only 11% of women. 11% of men say they're most aligned with MAGA or Donald Trump's brand, while only 3% of women do. So there's a stark political divide between young men and young women. And this shouldn't really surprise anyone because actually this came out a while ago. This was a University of Michigan Monitoring the Future survey. And this looked at the political identities of 12th grade girls and boys. Now that's the last year of high school. So this is 17, 18. And women are a factor of about ridiculous factor higher liberal, whereas the boys racing away with conservatism. And this is trending towards the time that they would be able to be eligible to vote in 2024. So it looks like there might be a constituent of conservative young men not showing up on polls. Now, we already know from the 2022 midterms in America that women voted overwhelmingly, single young women, overwhelmingly for Democrats because they're dependent on them for handouts and the safety net. But if young men are trending more conservative and women possibly being more socially agreeable over time are looking to court these young men, then it may be the case that they are swayed eventually. I'm trying to be an optimist here. Who knows? So to the Teen Vogue article, they say, the lines are clear here. On the whole, young men and women are more likely to lean progressive or liberal on the political spectrum than young men. Women are also women are also more likely to approve of the job Joe Biden is doing as president. The gender divide is also quite visible on the issue of abortion. 39% of men say abortion should be legal in all cases. 56% of women and 80% of those in the other category say the same. Now, I don't want to get kicked off YouTube, but I would suggest that some people in that box of other won't really have to worry about that.
Wouldn't have thought so, would you?
No, particularly because, well, there's a route to discontinue your generation. It's either not having children, killing them, or not being able
Castrating yourself.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. There we go. Also, 28% of men say abortion should be illegal in most cases. Only 10% of young women say the same. So that might change over time as more of them become mothers. But of course, 50.2% of women in the UK age 30 don't have children, which is an unprecedented number. I imagine America is trending much of the same way. But the most interesting part of this was this chart here. So they decided to look at what your political persuasions and how they impacted your dating preferences in young men and young women. Because, of course, young men and young women just sort of aren't really having relationships these days. And again, the stat for young men 18 to 30 was 27% of them have never had an intimate partner. And that skews towards the much lower end of the distribution. Alex Datespike has gone over that data, and I've got him in soon. So I thought we'd go through some of what these green flags are and these red flags. They're quite surprising. So do you consider each of the following traits to be a green, beige, or red flag in a partner? Both men and women said that reading is a green flag. Now, they didn't decide what they'd be reading. I mean, I wouldn't imagine breaking out books by mid-century Germans would get many women on side. But you do see lots of them sort of like romanticizing the bloke on the tube with the book out rather than the phone. And I do think that is actually a fair point, because the phone is the obsidian mirror which enchants you, whereas I don't know, if you've got a book in hand, you look a bit more classical, I suppose.
It's an interesting revealed preference, that, though, because there is something, dare I say, traditional about the aesthetic of reading a book. Because I think it's actually, there's probably an amount of it that is literally just the aesthetic of it. It's not the actual implications of somebody that reads a book. Now, that probably is also a factor. But I think you're right about the mysterious guy on the tube flicking through, flicking through the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. It's like, ooh.
But the only
mysterious.
The only problem there is that if everyone's got their head in a book or a phone, no possibilities for eye contact. And this is what a lot of women have been complaining about. But what was it? 55% of young men in the last year said they haven't approached a woman for a date, whether that's a stranger at a party or something like that. Whereas the majority of women said they'd like to be approached more often. And of course, there are lots of risk-averse young guys out there, understandably, since the Me Too thing. I mean, we've brought this up before. When I was on that Piers Morgan panel with Ava, she went, actually, I like that young men are terrified of false sexual assault claims. So well done for poisoning the well for all the women that aren't maladjusted and actually know their father and would quite like to get married one day. But there's obviously a lot of discouragement culturally for guys going up and approaching women. But if you just have that physical barrier there as well, you're never going to, if everyone's doing that, then it's going to be really difficult.
Yes.
But the more interesting bits were the political ones I found. So they say Black Lives Matter. 60% of women wanted that. 38% of men said that was a green flag. So again, the majority of men turning against progressivism. They identify as liberal. 39% of women, 29% of men. They're not on social media. 27% of women, 44% of men.
Interesting.
Now, I've written about this before, and this has gotten me in a lot of trouble when Calvin and I were talking about this. But I think lots of women don't understand that men regard having a publicly open social media profile to which you post lots of selfies to solicit online attention as a form of infidelity. Because if in your brain you have always got one foot out the door in the back of your mind, because there's a golden parachute there of a legion of online simps that can provide you compliments if we ever have an argument, how is a man ever going to trust that he's going to be able to invest in you?
Yes.
And so getting offline, touching grass and each other, that seems to be a lot healthier of a thing to do. And it seems that blokes are more attuned to that, but the perverse incentives are there for women to stay on these platforms because they can solicit validation at any point of their choosing. It's an old Stefan Molyneux line that I keep presenting. Porn is porn for men, attention is porn for women.
Interesting. Yeah.
There we go. They own a gun. That's very interesting. 22% of women, 46% of men. And this does track the studies that say if men are in presence of a weapon, loaded or not, their testosterone shoots up.
No surprise.
Yeah. I'm still waiting on Phil wanting to take me to a firearm range next time I'm out in the States. They say there are only two genders. This is 25% of women, 46% of men. Now, do you notice something about this survey?
Go on.
Remember they said there was that other category they surveyed?
Oh, yes.
Where's that?
I mean, when you were listing the other category, where is it? So it was like women. So it's like men versus women, trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming. I just heard women, 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 and women.
Hang on, you're saying that trans women are women? Very progressive.
Hey, what can I say, man?
All right, Leo.
Yeah.
But again, they've broken the survey down into two genders.
That is weird, isn't it? Where do they fall then?
Yep. Who knows?
A change of research accidentally based.
There we go. They say all lives matter. So 21% of women said that, 32% of men. They send green texts. That's not what you're thinking.
I was going to say that's a very specific and esoteric reference.
That's not 4chan.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Then.
Yeah, I think they're assuming of when like iMessage versus text shows up on phones.
Oh right. Okay.
But it turns out that a way to some girls' hearts might be sending a 4chan post, boys. Keep going, Anon. You've got this. They talk about politics too frequently. So it's 20% of women and 24% of men. So that's roughly floating around the average. Of course, there are, and this is something that actually I do want to address. A little while ago, I can't remember what the segment was. It might have been my discussion with Nina Power. Someone put below the video saying, this is all well and good, but where do we actually meet people to put these things into practice? And something I encountered when going around the March for Life rally for this year, a couple of weekends ago, is that lots of young men and women were there with friends, family, and the like, but there were a couple of blokes that joked, this is March for Wife. Now, show up because of the principle of the thing.
Yeah.
Show up because you care about it. Don't show up to get in front of a camera and grift. Like
have you watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Yes.
Because there's literally an episode about that.
Really?
You remember? It's like the first season. Charlie Gets an Abortion, I believe the episode is called, where Mac and Dennis go into the like anti-abortion crowd to pick up chicks.
Oh, and that's when Dennis was going on as well in the later season,
Yeah.
going on a date with women of different political persuasions, and just agreeing with them. Yeah.
Just repeating the lines back.
Yeah, exactly. That
brilliant.
works. So don't just go to events for that. But there's a two-factor thing here. One, show up to causes that you care about, because nothing changes if you don't make yourself present. Because they're always going to have paid actors on the other side screaming epithets at you. But also, the most likely place you're going to meet someone that have convergent values isn't the boomer truth idea of you just go to a bar and pick up chicks.
No,
I mean, sorry to AA, Carl, and Dan, but that was bad advice, mainly
Yes.
because Zoomers don't even go to bars, really.
No.
You're going to pick up the, Baz who's been having pints since lunchtime instead. Though his wife probably hasn't slept with him for ages. So go on, give him a show. Anyway, point being, if you go to these events, you're going to encounter people with the same values.
Yes.
You're going to have much more fruitful conversations. And the likelihood is, if everyone takes this approach, then you're going to have people also listening to this you didn't think you were going to run into, and you're going to meet someone, hopefully. And so you will get a Venn diagram of very politically involved people that try and meet each other.
Yes.
And so a bit of advice, I suppose. Maybe a bit of a more wholesome one.
Well, I tend to fall on these sort of, I like the Oakeshott line about this, about how politics is essentially downstream from temperament. So if you go to an event looking to meet like minds,
Yes.
and you meet members of the opposite sex who have your same political beliefs, you're fairly safe in assuming they're just going to be a similar person to you, which is, a good foundation for a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I just found a couple really funny on here. They identify as a communist, 11 and 11. So I guess the communists are going to match up. But the good thing is they won't be reproducing because they're all selfish and starving.
Or just straight up antenatal.
Yeah, well, they're doing our job for us, I suppose. They refuse to see the Barbie movies, also the other funny green flag one. 8% of women, 18% of men. That's very low energy from the men there.
Yeah.
They need to improve that. But on the red flag one, that's fun. They identify as a MAGA Republican. 76% of women said that's a red flag. And that was the number one red flag for women. So we're seeing the divide.
Yep.
On something very different. Men, 59%. Now, I wonder how many of those is because they don't see Trump necessarily as effective. Because I do know some Republicans in the DC sphere that see Trump as an aberration and they want DeSantis or something safer. Or I know I'm rolling my eyes hard. I just don't think that's the viable route.
Yeah.
But I do think it's very interesting how there's nearly a 20-point gap between the men that like Trump and the young women who definitely won't go with him.
Yeah.
There's also the All Lives Matter one is a major one, again, 60-40. They identify as a communist, 55% for women, 64% for men. So men are really gatekeeping relationships hard with that one. Women also apparently hate Joe Rogan, 55% to 35%.
Yeah.
They don't care about politics, 50% for women and 29% for men.
See, I saw that one on there and I thought that's a really interesting one because I have this perspective on politics that is basically, I think it's it's a historical aberration for everyone to be interested in politics. The time we live in now where everything is politicized and everybody has to have a view and everybody has to have a take and all the rest of it. That's actually kind of weird. And
I think it's kind of cruel.
Yes, it is. Because I think most people are not built to be engaged in politics. And when I think what this is saying here, when it says they don't care about politics, what that actually means is the 50% of women who regard that as a red flag, they think that makes the man immoral in some way, because they basically equate politics and morality. And I think it's not healthy for a society, because again, most people are not built to be constantly engaged in politics, because it does kind of, as you and I can probably attest to, it makes you kind of weird.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate that. Well, it wears you down, especially
It does,
because,
yeah.
and this is something that I think men particularly feel. Women will often see a political issue, liberal women particularly, see a political issue and scream for someone else to solve the problem. This was in the Barbie movie, for example, of where when initially her attempt at an insurrection didn't succeed, she just laid on the floor and cried.
Yeah.
That's most women's reaction to political issues when they're on the left. Whereas men will largely not care if their girlfriend is that involved in politics because he has the confidence as the head of the relationship that she's going to assimilate to his ideas over time. Again, many such cases. And this is why the revealed preference of lots of liberal women is for very right-wing
MAGA chuds.
Yeah, stupid, sexy Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Again, has happened before. Yeah, very interesting. The really interesting ones as well was they say Black Lives Matter. Women put that as a 14% red flag, right? So very low. Men, 33%. So the men are really going out in front in terms of policing the boundaries of progressive politics contaminating their relationships.
Yeah.
And so this is very encouraging if men are swaying this direction. And also if some of the reactionary feminists are making inroads to some of the young women, because to nick my friend's phrase, culture is downstream from what the hot girls want. And so if the hot girls decide, with the Nina Agdal thing that's recently happened with Logan Paul, if hot girls decide that the sexual revolution is actually a reputation risk and the pill's kind of making me fat, ugly and unhappy, and I'm going to abandon that, then the men are going to respond to those incentives because the most attractive women are going to do that. And other women are going to respond to men's incentives by saying, oh, actually, if I want a competent, well put together guy, I've got to fall in line with him not saying Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually quite an optimistic segment for once.
Yeah, quite a white pill to end on there.
Yeah. Good luck out there, young lads, kings and queens. Go find someone you can disrespect the liberal hegemony with. Happy days.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Symposium episodes, this one on value pluralism. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.